Okay, the story Here We Aren't So Quickly by Jonathan Safron Foer. He's generally regarded as one of the bright stars of the current literary scene. This story was published in 2010 in the New Yorker, so it's a newer one. It's sometimes a little bit difficult to get used to for people who don't read a lot of contemporary literature because of sort of the stylistic choices that it makes. It's composed nearly entirely of simple declarative sentences. There isn't a plot per se where one thing happens, then another thing happens, then another thing happens. It's more sort of a systematic listing of observations. But the story ultimately is very beautiful just because of the weight of all these observations. So I think probably a way to sort of initially begin understanding and appreciating this story is just to look at some of the observations that it makes. Like right from the beginning, I was just going through a tunnel whenever my mother called. You were not able to open most jars. You were just asking a simple question. These are all the types of things that serve to characterize the people who are taking place in this story. Also, you didn't know where emails were. I didn't know where my voice was between my phone and yours. You were too injured by things that happened in the distant past for anything to be effortless in the present. Sharing our happiness diminished your happiness. I was not going to dance at our wedding, and you were not going to speak. No part of me was nervous that morning. I did nothing but look for you for 27 years. I didn't even know how electricity worked. You couldn't tolerate people who couldn't tolerate babies on planes. All of these simple sentences, all of them might seem relatively flat and maybe even uncompelling when you're just sort of reading through them quickly. But then if you actually think about them in a little bit more depth and a little bit more detail, the beauty of the observations and the depth and poetry behind them starts to come to the surface. For example, they kept producing new things that we didn't need that we needed. Just to think about this simple sentence in and of itself and how it relates to our own lives sort of brings to the surface the beauty and astonishment behind it. So, with a story like this, it's important that you don't get caught up in trying to worry too much about plot. Just try to enjoy the ideas themselves. One big thing about this story, though, is its overarching theme. What is the message that it's trying to get across here? One of the things that it is trying to say is clearly the story is just a picture of a relationship. It's a picture of a marriage, of these two people who they find each other, they have all these experiences. Some of them are good and wonderful, other ones are terrible. People die, life goes on. All of these things that happen. For example, they have this child, and it says, he suddenly drew, suddenly spoke, suddenly wrote, suddenly reasoned. One night I couldn't help him with his math. He got married. Where all of these things, over the course of the story are taking place relatively slowly, but then boom, 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 20 years pass. All of these things pile up to paint a picture of this marriage. And like all marriages, all relationships, there are beautiful parts, but there are also parts that are struggles as well. And this story is not sentimental. It doesn't paint a picture of a marriage as a place where everything is happiness, but it also isn't painting a marriage as a place where everything is sadness. It just kind of is. So that brings us to a lot of the things that take place towards the end of the story. All of it formally, there are obviously many paragraphs, but there are no space breaks until we get one there towards the end, where it says, "You were in the garden, not planting, but standing there. You dropped 2 handfuls of soil." And then we get our one and only space break. And here we aren't so quickly. And here we aren't so quickly. Just trying to understand what Safron Foer is saying with that title is complicated. It's the idea that very quickly you're getting somewhere, but that somewhere that you're getting, you can't really define necessarily what it is. It's just a life. Simple as that. And then we get our last paragraph. I changed and changed, and with more time I will change more. I'm not disappointed, just quiet. Not unthinking, just reckless. Not willfully unclear, just trying to say it as it wasn't. So it has all of these things. And then it ends with this incredibly complicated sentence where it's talking about the beauty and the romance of two people spending their lives together, even if not all of it was amazing. So here, let's take a look at this last sentence. Be beside me somewhere, on the split stools of this bar, by the edge of this cliff, in the seats of this borrowed car, at the prow of this ship, on the all-forgiving cushions of this threadbare sofa, in this one-story, copper-crying fixer-upper whose windows we once squinted through for hours before coming to our senses. What would we even do with such a house? And here's the thing. What they would do with such a house is live their lives in it. All of it. The good things, the bad things, and everything in between. And that's one reason why this story, which even though at first reading it might seem disjointed and, maybe a little bit complicated to understand, ultimately is something that you can come back to again and again and again, because it is a story not just of the lives of the characters in it, but of the lives of all sorts of people. Some good things, some bad things, but ultimately, if you look back over it, there was beauty in the fact that there was a life lived in the first place.